Hey, it's Mr. Sportel back again. We're going to continue to talk about powers of 10, but this time we're going to focus on division. And now, most of the things that we talk about and that we see here are going to be very, very similar to multiplication, but obviously there's going to be one small change that I will be sure to highlight when it comes about. Just as in multiplication, please remind your students and children they do not need to put this into the Big 7 or use any other strategy of division where it requires them to put it in a model or use any of the other division strategies that we use. We can simply do what we did with multiplication, shifting the decimal points, except we are going to shift it in a different direction, which we will talk about very soon. So, again, here we see our first equation, which is 8 3/10 divided by 100. Just like with multiplication, we want to pay attention to the number of zeros we have in our divisor, right? So, since we have 2 zeros in our divisor, just like with multiplication, that lets us know how many place values we are going to need to shift the decimal. Again, we can't actually shift a decimal, we're not literally shifting a decimal, but it's the best way that we can explain it. So, here we have 8.3. Now, since we have 2 zeros in 100, for every zero we have, just like in multiplication, we are going to shift one place value. Now, since we're dividing, our number is going to get smaller. When we multiplied, we shifted to the right because our number was going to get larger. When we divide, we shift our place value, or our decimal, to the left because our number is going to get smaller. That is literally the only difference between multiplication and division. The same thing with the zeros, the same thing with the decimal points, things like that, except when we divide, we shift left, and when we multiply, we shift right. So multiplication, division, right? So, here we have our decimal point. We have 2 zeros, so we're going to shift 2 points. Now, that decimal point's going to go right there. Now, this is what we need to pay attention to. This blank space here needs to be filled with something. And the only thing that we're going to fill it with is a 0. Right? So, we see that when we divide 8.3 divided by 100, we shift our decimal point 2 places, and we end up with 83 hundredths. So, let's try another problem. Here we have 32 7/10 divided by 10 to the third. Now, if we remember from last video, 10 to the third is going to equal 1,000 because 10 to the third equals 10 times 10 times 10. So, we'll go ahead and rewrite this because I like to be able to see the total number of zeros I have here. So, we've got 32 7/10. We come up here, we see we have 1, 2, 3 zeros. That means we are going to shift 3 place values, 1 for every 0. So 1, 2, 3. There's going to be our place value. We see this empty space that we have here. Just like in the last problem, we are going to put a 0 there, and we have our answer. So we've got 327 10,000ths. Right? So, please, just like in multiplication, remind your students and your children, we don't have to put this in the Big 7, we don't have to do any long, drawn-out division problems where we try to find the remainders and stuff like that. We simply shift the decimal place however many place values for however many zeros we have. It does not matter how many problems you come across, as long as it's using a powers of 10 and you have zeros like we do here. That is all you need to do. Think about how many zeros you have. That lets you know how many place values you have, or place values, you need to shift. And then remember, if we're dividing, we're going to shift our decimal point left. Sorry about this arrow. That's pretty terrible. and that might not be much better. And if we're multiplying, we're going to shift that decimal point to the right. So I hope this video has helped for powers of 10 division.